Welcome to the Recover You podcast. I'm Kylene.
And I'm Patrick.
We are a couple in recovery
from sex addiction
and betrayal trauma. Together, we share our story to encourage you on your journey. It's here that we talk about sex addiction, betrayal trauma, mental, emotional, and physical health, faith, and anything and everything needed to recover you to your most authentic self that God created you to be. Welcome to this episode of Recover You. This is Kylene, and today is going to be a solo episode with me. Patrick is off spending some family time with his brother who's running a marathon, or who has successfully run a marathon this morning. And so they are spending some sibling family time together this weekend. For me, here at home, we had a really big weekend at our church this weekend. Our church is turning 150 years old. And if you ask me to say the formal name, it's a sesquicentennial. That's why I'm not going to say it. I can't do it. If you have me break it up, I will break it up and then I'll try to put it together, and it's a sesquicentennial. So it's 150 years. Anyway, we have been planning this celebration most of the year. I've been on the historical team helping people plan for, a different historical display throughout the year, all these sorts of things. So I've learned a lot about our church. And today was the kickoff of the 150th celebration. And so we had a lot of special music. Our church absolutely loves music. My sister plays the piano. My brother-in-law plays the organ. And so especially when we have a special Sunday with something different going on, there's like extra musical stuff. It was really fun. So I was the cantor this morning, which means I was up leading the hymns. My sister was playing the piano. My brother-in-law was playing the organ, and he would add different flourishes and different special sounds and additional, I'm going to say the wrong word here, like interludes or, he would do these fancy things on the organ, whatever you call those. But it was really, really beautiful. And we had the children's choir and the adult choir, and my niece played the violin, and then we had our regular violinist that played the prelude. So it was just a really beautiful service. One of the things that I had suggested as part of our celebration, which is going to go, it's a season of celebration. We kicked it off today, and it is going until May of next year, or actually the beginning of June of next year. One of the things I suggested in the planning was, why don't we have people every week come up and do a moment of grace, sharing what grace means to them? And so many people said that they would do that, and several of them had the caveat, I'll do it, but as long as I'm not the first one. So I went ahead and signed up to be the first person to do it. And I'm going to share that with you today. And the reason I'm going to share that, I promise I'm going to tie this into a topic that makes sense. But I'm going to share my moment of grace because this church has been very healing for me. I have had some ups and downs in my faith journey, and that's something that we haven't talked a whole lot about on the podcast. And maybe I will do some episodes about deconstruction and reconstruction and, how that has played out for me. But today I'm just going to focus a little bit on this, and the way I'm going to tie it in is I'm going to talk about the importance of connection for healing, for the betrayed partner's healing through recovery. And that's sort of going to be the tie-in here. So I hope it's okay, but I'm going to share the moments of grace. It's very short, and then I'm going to talk a little bit about why this has been so meaningful to me. Have you ever walked into Grace on Sunday morning and you feel that buzz in the air? The coffee is on, the bulletins are printed, the communion is prepped. The cantor mic is set up with your height in mind, and after church, lunch just happens to be set out. It's like magic. I'm Kylene Terhune, and I began attending Grace in December of 2019. At the time, I would hop around during Easter and Christmas participating in church choirs who might put on special music for the holidays. That particular year, I had been through cancer treatments, and my sister told me that her church, Grace, prayed for me every week. Cynthia sent me a pile of cards that I could periodically open during treatment, and Becky would check in when I came to Grace, even though I wasn't a member here. When I came for the Christmas cantata choir rehearsals, I said to Patrick, maybe we should come to a few services in between rehearsals. We were not actively looking for another church, but we decided to attend a few services anyway. And I thought, the pastor is really good. And here we are, we never left. There's just something special about Grace. Once we started attending regularly, we began meeting the people behind all the Grace magic. As it turns out, every cup of coffee, every printed bulletin, every meal has a real human behind it. People who care, who have a heart to serve, and who love to connect. Once we attended regularly, we began to meet the humans behind all the Grace magic. This year, I've been on the historical team, and I've had the wonderful opportunity to learn so much about our 150-year history. This is a church that has seen ups and downs and has persevered, worshiped God, and supported each other through it all. From 3 small families in 1876 to closing, to growing so large we built this building, to almost closing again, to today. This church has become like a family, a place to connect, to worship, to feel seen and loved. It has been a safe place, a haven, a place of growth, and for me, it's been a place of healing. It's here at Grace that I have seen and experienced God's love in action. This is what grace means to me. I know that many of you listening may have experienced church trauma. And so just be gentle on yourself listening to this episode if that is you, because I have been there and I understand, and that's a little bit of what I'm going to talk about today. When I say grace has been healing to me, the reason it has been so healing is because I had been really hurt in churches previously. And it has been through the past 5 years of going to Grace, while at the same time having everything with betrayal happen between me and Patrick and going through that season of pain, and then having anger towards God through that period of time and all these types of things. The timing of me going to Grace ended up being providential. Like I said in my statement, we were not looking for another church. We were actually quite active and involved in the church that we were going to, and we really liked it. We had gone there for 8 years. But I do like to be involved in the music. And so especially around the holidays, it's like a really, it just feels really good to me to be able to use that part of my life and to participate in that way. And that wasn't something I was able to do at the church I was going to at the time. And so I would go to our regular church and be very involved. And then around the holidays, I would go be involved in like a choir or cantata or, whatever. And that's how I ended up. Obviously, we had family connections. My sister, my brother-in-law, and her kids go to this church. But that's how we ended up there. But what I was not expecting was how healing it would be for me in many ways. And in order to kind of explain that, I have to rewind a little bit and share some of my history. So some of you may already know this story, but for any new listeners, you may not know any of this. I was married previously, and I was very young. I was like, I want to say 20 when I got married the first time. And it was a relationship that I should not have been in. I had a lot of red flags. I had a lot of cold feet going up to the wedding. It was almost canceled 2 weeks prior, but I went ahead and went through with it. I got married. It was a very unhappy relationship. Then there was some cheating, and I got divorced. Well, when everything came out, that's a very simplified, very fast version. But when everything came out, I was going to a church at the time that I was essentially raised in. Around the age of 7, we started attending this church. And at the time all this was going down, I was in my early 20s. And so it was about 17 years at least that I had been going to this church. So I'd grown up here. I'd been very involved. I knew everybody. My family my dad was on the deacon board, I think at the time, all this kind of stuff. So when I decided that I wanted to get divorced, my husband at the time, went and talked to the pastor. And I will never, ever, ever know what he said in that session. But what I do know is the reality that was our relationship, which was very, very not good. And what he was sharing with other people of being the repentant husband and wanting to reconcile and all of these things. But he was very he could not take responsibility. He was very gaslighty. Like he would make my head explode because I was like, you are not living in reality right now. And he just could not take responsibility for anything. It was infuriating. My head would just I couldn't handle it. So my pastor reached out to me, wanted to meet with me. I knew in my gut that this was not, I was like, no, this is not a good decision for me. I don't want to do that. But he pushed me. I said no 2 or 3 times before finally saying yes. I went in with my mom. I brought my mom. Someone else was in the room. I said, hey, you didn't tell me that so-and-so would be here. He said, yes, I did. So just keep that in mind. He said, yes, I did in an email. I said, no, you didn't. He said, yes, I did. The pastor wanted to argue with me. And I'm like, all right, whatever. So we sat down, checked later. Guess who had never told me that someone else would be there? So anyway, there's that. Gaslighting upon gaslighting. Woohoo. So I sit down. I already knew I shouldn't have done this, right? But I sat down. My mom was with me. And I think I might have talked very briefly, like a few minutes. And then it was like an hour of him talking at me. And the gist of it is he wanted me to do things his way. He wanted me to, I was like, hey, I'm seeing someone that is a counselor. They are a Christian. And that wasn't good enough. They wanted me to see someone that he approved of, and he wanted me to do it his way and whatever. So it was very stressful. That turned into a very traumatic experience in my life. And what's interesting about that, when you think about trauma, it's not that I didn't stand up for myself. I still got divorced. I didn't do anything that the pastor wanted me to do. I still did what I believed was right, and looking back, still believe was the right choice for me in all of those ways. I followed my gut. I followed my instinct. I knew what was right for me. The reality is I knew the reality of my relationship. He did not know the reality of my relationship. I did. And I was like, if your daughter was in the same position, you might have treated me differently. Live the 2 years that I've lived with this person and then get back to me with your opinions. So that's kind of where my mindset was at. What was so crazy about it is my mom and I both left feeling like there was this sort of veiled threat that if we didn't do things the way he wanted us to do them, that something would happen, like church discipline or something like that. So this was a super traumatic experience for me, because basically I grew up in this church. I was making this decision that was absolutely justified. And I ended up pulling my membership from that church because of how this went down. So I was like, yeah, I'm not going to pursue, this whole situation this way. So I contacted the board. It's a whole process because it was like an official membership. So I contacted them, and then I withdrew my membership, and that's sort of the short version of that story. But that really carried with me for a long time. And as I have grown and learned and continued to develop and think through things, this idea of this external spiritual authority, this is the example of how problematic that can be. When people take a position of power and then go, I know what's right for you in your life, and you have to do it. And then they use spirituality to manipulate, to guilt, or to control you, right? It's so totally not right. So fast forward, we went to this other church. Patrick and I went to this other church for about 8 years, really liked it, but I was never a member. After this experience I had that I just shared, I really had this idea of I am probably never going to be a member of another church again, because I don't ever want any sort of false position of authority placed over me in my life, because I don't agree with that. I don't think it's biblical. I had this really traumatic experience with that. So I'm just not going to ever become a member of a church, was kind of in my mind. But we were very involved in that church, very happy with it. Fast forward again, I go through cancer treatments, and then we end up at the church that I currently attend. We're there for, gosh, if this was 2019, it was barely over a year, and then Betrayal happens, and I start Discovery with Patrick. And when I think back on this timeline, I think God somehow orchestrated that I ended up at this church because of the wounding that I had in spirituality and the wounding that I had in church structure and religion and that sort of thing from my divorce. To be at the church that I am now with the pastor that is leading it, who has also been divorced, who has a grief counseling background, who is very wise, who is so gentle and so compassionate. I knew that when everything came out with Patrick, that he was a safe person. And even though that church that I mentioned in the middle that we went to for 8 years, like I love that church. I love the people there. The pastor is great. There's so many wonderful things. I don't want to say anything negative about it. I would not have necessarily felt comfortable going to that pastor and feeling like he was safe and informed and helpful in this area. And that's just the way it is. So the timing of me going to this new church, knowing that this pastor was safe, I went and I told him a few months into our story what was going on. And I was at this point, obviously devastated. I was absolutely struggling. And he handled it exactly the way a pastor should handle it. He asked the right questions. He didn't try to fix the problem. He didn't try to tell me what to do. He did say, at that point, we were already very connected to healing resources. So I was able to kind of share, that, I'm sure I said some of that in there about what we were doing and how we were addressing it. But he just listened and he asked some questions. And that, I think, was maybe one of the first moments that began to heal my heart. Through the process of betrayal, I also had a lot of, it was a shift in my relationship with God. Through the painful experiences that I've had in life, I feel like my faith sort of always existed through that. It's always rooted me. It's always grounded me. It's been something that's carried me through to an extent. And then this happened, and for whatever reason, this particular trauma in my life really, it just felt different in how I responded spiritually. I was angry. I was really, really angry. I was angry at God that I had been through all these hard things in my life already, that I had maintained my faith, and that this was happening to me. I think that's probably the simplest way to put it. I was just angry. I was really mad that this could happen. And I was like, I have been faithful and I have tried so hard. Why is this happening to me? And one of the things that I think is so true about God is that he's the healthiest relationship you can have because he can really handle all of it, right? There was no pressure from him to speed up my journey. There was no pressure to, how can you feel that way, Kylene? Stop being angry at me, Kylene. Shame on you, Kylene. No, he just listened. He just sat with me through that. And he was like, I'm here when you're ready. And it took me a long time. It took me a long time to process what was happening in my life. It took me a long time to open back up, be more vulnerable spiritually. I'm not really sure how to describe that. It's not that I lost my faith. It's just that I had a lot of different emotions through this process, if that makes sense. And so why was that moment one of the moments that was so healing for me? And that's where I'm going to tie this into connection for betrayed partners being so important. It's because there was a human being sitting in a room connecting to my pain and listening to me without judgment, without telling me what to do, without putting any blame or fault on me, just sitting there empathetically. I'm so sorry that has happened to you. Now, as I shared, we had already been connected to a lot of healing resources, and I'm sure that I shared those with him at the time, because one of the things that was so cool about the pastor that we have now was he said, hey, when people come to me with, porn addiction and things of that nature, which does happen, he goes, generally, I recommend that they go to SA. So first of all, kudos to him because he was already doing a lot more than sometimes other people do, pointing them to an existing outside resource. So 10 out of 10 there. But what he also did was express curiosity in the things that we were learning about other resources that can be really helpful. And he was very, very open for us to give him resources and education around that area so that he could then pass that on when people come to him. So that was just amazing. So again, healing, number 2, right? Like someone there witnessing me in that room empathetically and kindly. And then 2, being curious and wanting to, pass it on and help others. So connection is so important. It's so, so, so important. And there's several versions of connection that are important. You have to have connection to self, connection to others, and I'm going to say connection to God. Is so important through the healing journey. Connection to self is, it's that self-trust. It's that ability to go into yourself, know what is true, know what your values are, know what you believe, and make decisions from that place. You could call it self-worth. It could manifest itself as self-confidence sometimes, although we have an episode on how those two are different. So check that out if you haven't listened to that. But it can manifest in those ways, or it might come across in those ways. If you don't have a lot of connection to yourself, you might find yourself asking a lot of questions like, is this true? Am I being too much? Am I too emotional? Am I being controlling? Those sorts of questions are when you doubt yourself. And when you doubt yourself, it's because your connection to yourself and your values and your core is not fully aligned. And so one of the pieces through the healing journey is really going to be wanting to connect to self. Now, fortunately or unfortunately, in some situations maybe, that's not really an issue that I generally have. And so that kind of ties into that original story with the pastor that was, super traumatizing for me. I was like, nope, this is my reality. This is my truth. I'm not going to go shove myself into some box just to check off a box for you that makes you feel good, like something about my life. Like I know who I am, I know what's right, I know what I believe, and I did have to do some soul searching during that time of my life to really make sure that I felt very confident and clear on my decision. So I knew myself and I knew what I believed. But I know a lot of people, this is an area that you struggle with. And so again, therapy, coaching, practitioners, but this is connection. This is the connection piece. Even when we are talking about connection to self, sometimes it's connection to others, being seen by others, being witnessed by others, being encouraged by others, getting feedback from others that helps us rebuild or build for the first time that authentic connection to ourself. And that is really where I think this sense of like deep grounding can come from, is when you can, like, people can think and do and behave the way they want to. And it's less confusing when you are really, really rooted in your own reality. So like when you have people like my ex-husband who would just gaslight and not take responsibility. And I was like, what reality are you living in? If you are very clear about what your reality is and what truth is and who you are, it gets less confusing sort of when you're in that muddle, because I'm on the outside over here going, that's not reality. Like the sky is not purple. You keep telling me it's purple, but it is definitely blue. You know what I mean? But if I didn't have a deep connection to myself in that period of time, I might have been like, is the sky purple? Is it? Like maybe he has something here. So that's just an example. When we're healing, we really want to develop that connection to self. And that can be a process. And we all have various strengths and various weaknesses. I think one of my weaknesses is connection to others. So when I got married to Patrick, I sort of just, I don't know, I got lonely after the first couple years. I think I was just sort of in this world of like, I'm so happy and we're married and I love you and I just want to spend time with you all the time and nothing else matters and I'm home all the time. And then 2 years in or whatever, I was like, I'm kind of lonely. I don't have any friends. And then it hit me. I was like, well, Kylene, if you want to have friends, you actually have to say yes to invitations. You have to like go to the events that you're invited to, right? All of these kinds of things. But through betrayal recovery, connection to others is so, so important. One of the reasons is because I just listed that out. It's that being seen, it's being witnessed, it's someone sitting in the room with you and hearing and seeing your whole story and saying, I'm sorry that you're going through that. Maybe not even maybe giving advice, but just saying, I see you, I love you, and I'm here for you. When we don't have connection to others, it can feel so isolating. And this is something I really see in the betrayal community. There's so many times where I hear, I can't tell anybody. And there's this self-protection mode that has been activated, or protection for the partner who has done the betraying. Protection mode activated, where it's like, I can't tell anybody, I can't tell my friends, I can't tell my family. If that was a client of mine, I might challenge you a little bit, because I really believe that recovery happens in the light, and that living in truth is the most healing. And so when we are hiding a huge part of our lives, it ultimately is going to cause pain, and it's going to feel what I see is extreme isolation, this feeling of loneliness, this feeling of isolation, this feeling of not being seen. And so if you really are like, there's no way to tell a friend or a family member, it's like there's just absolutely no chance that that's going to, be something that you'll do, then I would really encourage, like, at minimum, to connect with others through support groups, whether it's online or in person. Connect to a therapist, a coach, a practitioner. Someone needs to hear your story. You deserve that. You deserve to say it out loud, to say what's happening to you, to be seen, to be heard, to be witnessed. It's so, so crucial for our healing. Because with connection to others, really comes safety. That's part of how we get our safety, is being seen. I remember even years and years ago when I had my first couple bouts of intrusive thoughts, and they were so scary to me. I was like, what is wrong with me? I am crazy. I am going insane. It was so close, legitimately, to asking to be put in a psych ward. I just did not know what was happening. And it's not really, because it was so traumatizing to me, but it's almost laughable to me now, because today, with my understanding of intrusive thoughts, I'm like, yeah, I needed to be told basically that you're normal and there's nothing wrong with you. But when I was having those first bouts, it was so scary for me to tell people, but I was at the end of my rope, and I had to start telling people what was happening in my head. And I remember I went on a girls' day with one of my friends, and just being around people also helped me feel better. So again, that connection, just being around other people, being in their energy, being in their environment is healing in and of itself. So there is a cocoon period, I think, through betrayal recovery, where it's we cancel things, we focus on each other, we have these deep conversations, and there's a time and a place for everything, right? We also have to make sure that we get out of the house and then we connect to others, and we're engaging in other people's energy and getting that, because that's filling our cup, that helps us have that resilience to keep going. And I remember it was early in the intrusive thoughts era, and I went out and I had this day with my girlfriend, and she was so gentle. There was no judgment. And she more or less, whether she said these words or not, was just like, yeah, you're normal. It's okay. It was so nice just to get it off my chest and to not be judged. And because in my head, these thoughts were scary. I'm like, what is wrong with me that these are popping into my head? And for her to just sit there with me and be like, yeah, was so healing. So connection to others is absolutely so important. I'm going to read a little excerpt from you. This is from the book, The Grounded Liberation Method. And this is actually written by a friend of mine. His name is Ron Ray, and we are going to have him on the podcast soon. So stay tuned. I'm just going to read this little excerpt about connection. What you need is not just self-awareness. You need connection that interrupts the spiral. Real connection functions like an anchor in the stormy seas. It reminds you that there is life outside your looping thoughts, which is so applicable to the intrusive thoughts story I was just telling you. Back to the book. Healing rarely happens in isolation. It happens in relationship with people, with community, with the world outside your own looping thoughts. Without it, even the most disciplined practices can feel hollow. Connection works because it interrupts the self-perpetuating cycles of rumination and shame. When you get out of your head and into connection, your nervous system finds safety, your body resets, and your mind quiets. Suddenly, the problems that seem insurmountable while you were alone feel more navigable. Even the mere act of telling your story to a witness, someone who doesn't judge or rush, creates a neurobiological ripple of relief. I just wanted to read that. It reiterates so much of what I was just sharing with you. It's like literally just saying something out loud to somebody is healing. Just that part, just having someone hear the reality that you are living in feels like a weight is taken off. Now, there's always people that are going to have healthy responses and people who are going to have unhealthy responses. And, we encourage you to think about who might be empathetic and kind and safe in your circle. And again, if maybe you kind of don't feel like there are friends in your circle that have the capacity to hear your story, look for a support group. Find some way to share your story. It is so, so healing to just say it out loud, and not just once. I remember the first time that I said, my husband is a cyber sex addict. My face got so red while the support group was looking at me, even though I had already heard like 5 different stories from these women going around the room about their experiences and their husbands. And I knew that we were all more or less in the same boat. But when their eyes turned towards me, I just felt embarrassed. It felt heavy. It felt shame. It felt like spotlight on me for something I never asked for. It was horrible. And now, hello, my name is Kylene, and you are listening to the Recover You podcast, and we talk about sex and porn addiction and masturbation and faith and healing. And I've said it aloud so many times now that it doesn't even bother me. If someone asks me what I do, and it's the appropriate situation for me to tell them, caveat, my nervous system doesn't react anymore when I say, hey, I work as a betrayal recovery coach, and my specific niche is working with women whose husbands are recovering sex or porn addicts. And that's it. So saying things out loud to save people and then doing it over and over and over and over and over and over and over again can be so healing. And then I'm going to wrap with the idea of connection to God. Now in SA, they say higher power. I am a Christian. I believe in God. I'm going to say God. If that doesn't work for you, that's okay. But I do think that it is important that we believe something is bigger than us. And there's so many reasons for that, right? Like what we were just talking about of being witnessed and getting out of our head. And our brain, while it is super cool and always trying to protect us, it knows what we are afraid of. And so sometimes it brings that up to help us feel safe or to help us be safe. And it makes us feel anything but safe. And so sometimes it's important to root into who we are, right? To ourselves, connect with others so we can be seen, and they can say, no, that's so silly. That's not reality. You're fine. You're normal, right? To get that feedback. And then also to be connected to God. This is going to give us a sense of purpose. There's something bigger out there. There is a purpose for my life. If you ever go out, it's fall here in Ohio. And so the leaves are changing. And so just the past couple weeks that I've been taking walks with Coco, and today we took a hike together. It's just, I'm so amazed by the beauty of nature. And that just gets you out of your head, right? You're looking at the colors, you're looking at the sky, you're looking at the leaves, you're looking at the different plants. You're just looking at all of these really beautiful, the way the sun, comes through the trees and has all these sparkles or shines through a leaf, the way it's sitting in a grass. I mean, it's just incredible. It is art. It is amazing. It is bigger than us. How this happens, how this world works, how it all is put together so perfectly that it doesn't just fall apart any minute. It's amazing. It's so amazing. So there's that connection to something bigger than you. It helps us get out of our head. My mom used to say something to the effect, I'm not going to get this exactly right, but something to the effect of basically if you're really depressed, think about something that you can do for somebody else. And it's so true, right? Now we maybe can't do that every single day. And the reality is that significant trauma, like betrayal trauma, may be a significant period of time where we're feeling ups and downs and sadness and grief and depression and anxiety. But there is something to what she said, right? And we get in our head and we ruminate, and we can really create stories, and we can repeat them, and we can validate them in our own mind, and they can get bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And so connection is so important, because connection to God and going outside, and it's just like, there's something bigger than me. Connection to others gives us that feedback that we're normal, that maybe our story isn't that scary, that maybe we're not alone, that we will be okay. And connection to self gives us that grounding, that confidence, that alignment, to be able to feel empowered in the decisions that we're making. So tying it all back to this morning at my church, sharing that moments of grace. Grace has just been such a healing place for me through this process. A few years ago, Patrick and I presented to the council our stories, because we were asking to use some of their space to host a Conquer group, so Patrick could lead a support group in the church. And so we have to go through, talking to different people on the council and everything. And of course, with my past, going up against quote unquote church authority and in a vulnerable position, and then having such a negative experience, that was kind of scary for me. Now, I knew that this was a different place, and I knew that these people were different people, of course, but it was still really, really scary and parallel enough that I was really nervous about it, but I also thought it was the right decision to do, and I wanted to get this, support group in there. And so we go in and we have these prepared statements, and Patrick reads his story and shares how Conquer has helped him. And then I read, how hard this has been for me and the pain that it's caused me in front of these people that I go to church with, And their response was just amazing. One of the first things that someone said was, how do we help the women? Or what do the women need? Like, what? What a kind, empathetic response to my painful story. To go, like, how do we help? What do we do? Right? How do we help? We had so many people that praised Patrick for sharing his story. We had people hug us. We had people open up and share, that maybe decades ago their husband had cheated on them, or there was, porn in their husband's marriage or their marriage, or, different stories kind of started to come out. And my point with that is we only received support. So I went from one really vulnerable position and it ending extremely badly to another extremely vulnerable, scary position, to being seen, being loved, being accepted through some of our scariest, most painful moments in our life. So when I think about connection, that's kind of what I think about. Finding these safe people that can really demonstrate God's love, that can demonstrate empathy, that can demonstrate compassion, that can sit there and see you and hear your story and say, I love you. I'm not going to judge you. Maybe then they open up and share a little bit about their personal story. But I just wanted to share that today. I don't know if the way I tied everything together makes sense. I don't know if it was helpful. I hope it was applicable to your life. Maybe you can relate to different pieces of my story. I don't know. But this has been a very healing journey for me. We talk about the recovery journey and how much it has impacted me as the betrayed partner. But there's been a spiritual component for me as well. And to be part of a group of people that is so sincerely demonstrate God's love, and you feel that, has been so healing for me through this process, to work on healing myself, to working on healing my relationship with Patrick, to working on healing my relationship with God, or getting back to a place maybe that felt a little more comfortable, however you might word that. And a big piece of that has been going to an environment where I'm surrounded by these people that demonstrate what I think love looks like. And that has been tremendously healing. I hope this has been encouraging to you today. I hope some piece of my story can relate to yours. Just sending you so much love today. Remember that every day is a new opportunity to choose health and freedom. Make that choice today, and we will see you next week. Woohoo! If you're listening to this, it means you've made it through an entire episode. Part of recovery is spending time engaging in healing and self-growth activities. We are thankful that you chose our podcast to be one of those activities today. Make sure you reward yourself for that accomplishment. If you've enjoyed this episode or this podcast, we would love to hear from you. Please take just a few moments to leave a rating and review, letting us know your experience with Recover You. We not only love hearing how these episodes are helpful, but ratings and reviews help others just like you who are searching for recovery information and support find the podcast too. We can't wait to hear from you. See you next week.